somehow the through line for the 2 episodes I decided to do was rats. Who knew? So this is a commissioned review. I was commissioned to take a look at 2 episodes from Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Came out last year on Netflix. I had wanted to see it at the time. I did not get to it. But I've now found reason. And if I'm ambitious, maybe I'll try and do more before the month of October is over. But I was commissioned to watch any 2 episodes. Usually when people commission me to watch only 2 episodes out of a show, they'll tell me what ones they want. This one, it was like, pick any 2. I picked 2 more or less at random. So I'm going to talk about The Graveyard Rats and The Dream in the Witch's House. So one of these turned out to be pretty dang good. The other one turned out to be just okay. Let's start with the pretty dang good one. Graveyard Rats. It's pretty good. Like, here's the thing about this story. It does a fairly standard thing in horror short format, which is to have a relatively deplorable character as its lead. Someone who you're not going to feel the world is being super cosmically unfair to when horrific stuff happens to him. That's a pretty common thing. The trap of this kind of character, though, while it enables you to do horrible stuff to them and not have it seem overly cruel, and you can get into the fun of horror stories, one of the catching points with characters like this is that oftentimes they will be unreasonably bad people. And our lead character in this isn't. I'd actually say, while the circumstances he's in are his own fault, I think the things that he does and the way that he behaves under the circumstances he's in, pretty understandable. Like, nearly every choice he makes, I'm not going to say I would have made the same choice in that situation, but I get why he makes it. It doesn't seem unreasonably foolish, which is often what happens with these kinds of characters in this kind of story. But given the dire financial situation he's in, that he's fearing for his life, as far as plot goes, he manages a graveyard and he also grave robs in order to, get everything from gold teeth to brooches to whatever else to sell to try and pay off I believe it's a gambling debt. And he's not a good guy. He's not. And his main problem right now is the rats keep getting into the graves before he can, and they're like stripping things bare. And what he's doing, again, situation is his own fault, but what he's doing, he has access to these graves. There's things of value in there. He's going to go for them. That is understandable. When a body that he knows for a fact was buried in stuff that is worth as much as he needs, probably more, to get out of the situation he's in, and he digs it up, and the entire body's being dragged away into a tunnel system by the rats, I understand why he is desperate enough to think, I just need to follow and I just need to get these valuables off the body. That's all I need to do. And as he keeps finding himself in these, I'm not going to fully spoil this, but as he keeps finding himself in these more and more extreme situations, pretty much every choice he makes, I get why he makes it. It's not the choice I necessarily would have made, but it is a reasonable choice. And that's just nice to see with this kind of character in this kind of story, as he just finds himself in these tombs and eventually these catacombs with these rats and other stuff that he encounters down there, and it just gets worse and worse. And there are always consequences to his actions, but often those consequences are unreasonable within realistic constraints. What happens to him would not happen to you or me, though you or I probably still would do some of the stuff. But again, how reasonable it is, and he feels very human. He's a little bit of a jerk, but he's desperate. And you get that a lot because he's very frequently, desperately praying to God, swearing he'll be a good person. Of course, he's very much the kind of person who'll swear when he thinks his life is on the line to be a good person, and then get to safety and basically go, I'll take care of that later. He is that kind of guy, but it feels very human. He feels like a very lived-in character. And you kind of need that for a story like this, because otherwise it's just a series of supernaturally twinged extreme events. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to watch this stuff happen. Which is why in a lot of these stories, you make the guy just utterly unredeemable so that theoretically the audience gets some catharsis out of seeing him get whatever's coming to him. This one doesn't go for that. I think it strikes an interesting balance, ends up with a stronger character who still fits the archetype that this story needs for its lead character. And yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty effective. The second one I watched, A Dream in the Witch's House, was okay. It's a Lovecraft adaptation, which initially had me kind of excited because, look, Lovecraft, massive racist, and yes, it does show up in his work. He literally had a supernatural force that was dubbed in some stories. Actually, the original version of this very story was just called The Black Man. Yeah. Lovecraft, not a good guy. But I've always found his ideas interesting enough that I'm always happy to see somebody's new take on it, somebody's new spin on it. I like to see creators who are not him do something with his ideas. It's part of why I worked my way through the entire first and now only season of Lovecraft Country. As mixed as I found that show to be, I really like it when people take his ideas and do something with them. And this adaptation kind of misses the mark. This is one of the short stories of his that I am actually familiar with. It's been a long time, granted, but it adds some stuff that I don't think is a problem. It like adds additional motivation for its main character, played by Rupert Grint, doing a pretty decent job, actually. I haven't seen him act in anything in a while, and he's pretty good. He does obsession quite well in this, so that works. So like they give him more deeply rooted motivations for what he's doing. In my memory, at least, of the story, he basically just ends up at this house and the stuff just kind of starts happening. Like he kind of was looking into it a little bit, but he didn't have a point of obsession the way this version does. That change, I think, works. I think it's more to do with what they stripped out. Because here's the thing. There's a reason that when people talk about Lovecraft, they tend to talk about his mythos a bit more than they talk about his specific stories. They talk about the concepts, the ideas of the elder things, the elder gods, ideas like Cthulhu, of the Shoggoths, of these notions. And not that many people actually talk about the nuts and bolts stories that he wrote. Because, like, they're fine. But with only a couple of exceptions, like Shadow of Rinsmith, you know, that's one. And At the Mountains of Madness is the other big one. But most of the rest of them, the mythos that he's building is going on in the background. It's something that is in the mix and getting encountered, and details get dropped in various of these short stories. But the core actual narrative of what the story is just like, yeah, that works, I suppose. And that's kind of what this one is. Both in terms of its original version, the actual written story, again, my memory of it. It's made more interesting by the little dabblings of the greater mythos, of some of the notions of the elder gods and the elder things that are out there that the lead character gets as he is in this house, what is dubbed the witch's house, a place where it is believed that a witch died, and he begins having these dreams. And those dreams, the dreams here as presented, are way more focused on one specific thing. In the original, they're much more spread out across a bunch of stuff, including, again, sort of drip feeding the mythos. And that gives it a sense of grandiosity that when you strip that out, and I get why they would strip out the Cthulhu mythos stuff from this story if you're just doing it as a one-off adaptation. I get why you would do that, because that stuff ultimately is kind of superfluous to the core story being told. But it's also kind of what makes it more interesting, because the story itself is, yeah, he sees this stuff on the other side of the line between life and death, and it notices him, and here it comes. And there's some visual flair to this that works really well. There's a handful of shots that are really nicely put together, and when we initially see sort of, I'm not going to say exactly what it is. Again, I don't want to spoil, but this thing that's in the room, that's in the attic with him. The initial thing that we see of it, it's largely in silhouette with just these two red points for its eyes. it's really effective. Then we get a closer look at it, and it's like, that's not nearly as effective. It was way more effective the way you were shooting it before. And I think when you strip out the grander notions of the Cthulhu mythos from a story like this in particular, you end up with a fairly pedestrian horror story that works. It functions. That was okay. It just doesn't really stand out. Because Lovecraft, aside from being massively racist, had a lot of really interesting grand ideas. You know, the whole notion of cosmic horror, the vastness of the universe terrified him. And there's a lot you can do with that. His actual writing, his skills as a writer, he wasn't a bad writer, but he wasn't great. He was okay. His ideas were better than his abilities as a writer. And I feel like the bigger ideas that elevated a lot of his otherwise kind of pedestrian work are the kind of things that get stripped out of straight adaptations like this, which is a shame. And I'm not necessarily saying that they should have kept the Cthulhu stuff in, Cthulhu-related stuff. Cthulhu himself doesn't show up in that one, I'm pretty sure. But just more the idea of like, maybe this is the wrong Lovecraft one to adapt. You know? It was okay, though. Looked decently enough. Like I said, Rupert Grint gave a good performance. It was okay. First one was pretty good, though, that I watched. The Graveyard Rats, I actually did like a fair bit. Like I said, if I find myself with time, I might try and watch some more of these this month. That is unlikely. More likely I will watch some more of these when I get the time, and maybe you'll get some reviews, some more reviews of this thing when it's no longer particularly seasonal. I don't know. We'll see. The Cabinet of Curiosities, Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Have you seen the show overall? Have you seen these particular episodes? If you have, what do you think of them? If you have seen the whole thing, what are your favorite episodes of this show? Whatever your thoughts might be, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. It's how I was, in fact, commissioned to review this particular set of works. But don't worry too much about it. I appreciate all the help, and feel free to commission me to do stuff. I am trying to catch up. I'll get to it eventually. But don't worry too much about that. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. Time to thank some Patreon backers, and in the spirit of October, I'd like to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Goddess Alita, Turok, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernobulax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, and Rosalind Bennett. Thank you for your assistance. I don't know, I might try theming the shoutouts in the future. I don't know, we'll see. Thank you.